Hi, I'm John and this is Up for Excel, and today I'm going to show you how you can create an Excel chart in under 1 second, and that is a promise. I'm then going to talk you through all the elements of Excel chart design, so how to add things like legends, titles, various different styles, colours. I'm going to talk you through how to add different amounts of data, talk you through all the different chart types. So there's a lot in this video, and if you keep watching till the end, what we'll do is we'll end up with a chart that looks maybe something like the one we've got on the screen at the moment, and I'll show you how you can create that from raw data within a few seconds or so. So let's get on with it. So one of the things you're going to need to do before you do anything to do with any charts is you need to get your data laid out in a sensible way. So what I've got here is keeping this very simple at the moment, some basic data where I've got periods of the year. So I've got a couple of old prior years, and by quarter I've got the sales figure and the profit number. And we want to turn this into some kind of a chart. Now, it's pretty important that the data is grouped together, so you've not got blank columns in between, for example, you've not got blank rows or anything. You want to get your data looking like this so that you can, for example, just highlight it and it's all sort of self-contained. Get the columns titled in the way that you want, get the rows titled in the way that you want, and you're really good to go. So I promised you a minute ago I'd be able to create a chart in under 1 second. So here goes. That's definitely in less than 1 second, wasn't it? Right. Okay, so what did I do there? Well, I simply pressed F11 because F11 is a shortcut key to produce a chart sheet with your chart, and then we can manipulate it from there onwards. Now, just show you one other tip, because you can also highlight the area and push Alt F1, and that will produce a chart in the same sheet that you're currently in. Now that can often be what you want to do. Now I'll just go through one other point, because maybe you want to do this manually. You want to do it a more difficult way. It's possible. So I'm just going to delete that chart there, so it doesn't confuse things. So say, for example, we do the same thing with just the sales. So we've got our sales chart, but we then we've now been given the profit numbers and we want to add them on. So you'll see that as soon as you have a chart selected, so a new toolbar appears. I'm just going to move that over there so we can make it a bit larger. And today I'm going to talk through this design toolbar. I've got another video where I talk about all the formats, so make sure you look out for that one, and be going through that another day. So in the design toolbar, one of the first things I'm going to show you today is the select data button. So if you click on the select data, you can see you've automatically got your chart range, and it's coming up here, and it's showing it sort of highlighted. Now we could just change that chart range to there, to here, for example, right? And then you can see the chart is automatically updating above to now include the profit. So incredibly simple. But if the profit was somewhere else, for example, we could if we leave that how it was, we can manually add a series, and we can either type in a name, or in this case I'm just going to click on the name, and then again on the series values we click on that button and we just highlight the numbers that we want to add, and you can see straight away it's put them on, and we're back in the same kind of position that we were in a minute ago. So we'll do OK. Now you can see that it's recognized this area, that these areas are all connected. So it's just joined them up, and we've we're there anyway. Okay. So again, with the chart highlighted, we're now going to look at some different chart types. So we've got this button here, change the chart type. So what this is going to do is it gives us a little preview as we hover over it. So I'm trying not to do that too much. And down the left-hand side, we've got all the different kinds of charts that you're pretty much ever going to want to need. But not only that, at the bottom, we've actually got combination charts, which I'll talk you through later. And then as you click on the different types of charts, you can see that you've got various different ones along the top. And each one that you click on, you then have some subtypes that show you different configurations of that same type. So stack column, for example, which is the one that I just happen to have as the default, is the one that we're showing at the moment, and that has you can see it's got the quarters along the bottom and sales and profit bars in each quarter. This, for example, if I change to this and just OK it, what you can see it's done is it's put all the different quarters sales together and all the different quarters profit together. Now that actually is exactly the same as pushing this button here, which is switch row and columns, because switching rows and columns effectively has just done the exact same thing. So we can have a stacked column where we show the bars on top of each other. We can have a stacked column that matches 100%. Now this one can be slightly useful in that here you can see the profit percentage. Now actually you'd probably want to see this the other way up. So how do you do that? Right, you go to select data and you select one of the two options that you've got at the moment, and you can actually change the order. So now we're going to say, yes, we want the profit first, and you can see that it's just switched them. So now you'll be able to see the profit percentage on the chart, and you can see that, say, 2018 Q4 was nearly 20% profit. So that can be a useful chart type. Carrying on through them, you then have your 3D chart types, which personally wouldn't recommend. I don't think they're particularly easy to follow unless you're doing some kind of flash report that's just using some kind of representative graphic. I mean, they have their place, but in terms of conveying information, they're typically more difficult to read. Line charts, fairly self-explanatory. Now, there's not a lot. You can have a stacked line, but that's quite a confusing chart. Again, there's the percentage line. Now, this one is quite interesting because if I pick this, it's very easy to see your profit percentage now. You've effectively created a profit percentage chart. And if you were to format that there, the sales line, to be invisible, there's a fairly quick way of producing a profit percentage chart, for example, in this case, without having to do any calculations in Excel itself. But what we're going to do is carry on here. Hold on, we need to select the entire chart when we're doing chart type. Because if we just happen to have a particular series selected, as you saw, it jumped into the combination chart. You can have the lines with various different dots and sizes on, or again, 3D versions. Pie chart is not going to be a particularly sensible option in this case, although you could do, for example, this is showing profit by for each quarter as a percentage of the total profit over those 2 years. Bar charts, exactly the same as the column chart options, just shown side by side. Just shown horizontally rather than vertically. Area charts can be useful. This stacked area chart, for example, showing the profit and then the sales on top. Again, this one, similar sort of thing to the line chart that we're showing. They're just colouring it in. XY scatter is not going to be of any use to us right now. Although this one, for example, is showing the, let's just show that one, the sales versus profit. It's not particularly well labelled. We'd have to do quite a lot of work to get that showing something meaningful. But it can be useful to plot because it shows you can create things like lines of best fit through that and get sort of various averages and things worked out. Right, carry on. You have various other sorts of bubble charts, for example, 3D bubble charts, stock charts. Now, I'm not going to go through most of these other ones, to be honest. Okay, I'm now going to talk you through how to make a combination chart quickly. Because if on the left-hand side here, you see you go down to combo and you have your two series, in this case, sales and profit. And the instant one it's showing, which is one I would probably say is quite appropriate, in fact, is to show the sales as columns and the profit as a line. Now, you could have it as a line with dots. You can pick, in fact, any of the, I mean, you can pick examples where it would look totally ridiculous. So we will stick, I think, to something like a line with markers. Now that's quite interesting because what that's straight away done, you can see, is it's ticked this button secondary axis. Now I'm not going to go through that in detail, but what effectively it's done is plotted that line against a scale on the right hand side, whereas the columns are plotted on the left hand side. Now it can be quite useful, but it also can be quite deceiving and hard to read sometimes. So I'm going to take that off at the moment. But just be aware that that flag can get ticked and you might need to untick it. Now I'm going to look at adding various elements into the chart. So over here on the left-hand side, you have, of the toolbar, you have something that says Add Chart Element, which will give you a drop-down menu that you can look through. But also you have here a plus sign when the chart is highlighted that you can use, and again you have the same thing here, but you get these little sort of previews which can be quite useful. Personally, I prefer to add via this menu here. So first of all, we have titles, I think. So axes we already have. We have showing a primary horizontal axis, which we can switch off. We could switch off the vertical one, for example, or the primary. So if we say that we're going to add some titles then, so axis title, so primary or horizontal, that will give us a box showing a title that you can see has appeared, or vertical, which has appeared there as well. So let's add a title to the bottom, and then we can say, you can just click on this and you can just type year and quarter. Now, I think it's probably blindingly obvious. If we click on it so that we're not actually in the editing, you can use the standard menu in Excel to make that bold or increase the font size. And you can see it's semi-intelligent in that the chart is moving around as you do that. You can move this box, drag and drop this box around. So we'll do something like that. So that's done that. Go back to the design. Now I think that we might do a chart title now. So at the moment you've got none. We can do above chart or centered. Now above chart is probably the most obvious place. So I'm going to call this one sales and profit. And again, I'm just going to use the standard Excel menu to make that a bold title. Push the font size up a bit. Okay. Other elements that we could add that may well be useful on here are we could, in fact, add a data table, and that adds all the values at the bottom. Now, we could do that with or without a legend. We can actually add a legend, which we might want to think about doing. So I quite like to put it at the top. So if you see where this is kind of moving, you're getting previews of everything, but let's just say we want it at the top. So that gives us that. Again, just like everything else on the chart, you can use the standard Excel home menu. You can make that bold. You can change the font size. I mean, I wouldn't make it italic personally, but we can do something like that. Can reposition it wherever we like. Okay. Other chart elements that are generally quite useful are having data labels. Now, and these are going to look quite messy, to say the least, if we're not careful, because we're dealing with some quite large numbers. But there's various different options on here, and what I think I'm going to do is do the outside end ones here, but what we want to do is we need to format these. Now, an easy way, by default, all the formats of any numbers that you're seeing on screen or anything is linked back to the source information. So if I actually make these a more sensible format by changing the number format here, and we'll just pick a standard number, no decimal places and a comma, you see straight away that that's going to look a lot better. And personally, I would probably not want to see so many numbers, so I'm just going to, we could use a custom format on here to change this so that it shows in thousands perhaps, or we could do something similar on here. So if we click one click on the numbers, we'll highlight the entire series and allow us to position that somewhere or do something with it. So one thing we could do, for example, is we could rotate the text so it's like that, and then we could we go back to this menu here and we go back to our data labels. If we put those, we call inside end, and we could make them bold and perhaps even change the colour so that they show as white. Something like that might be slightly more, less heavy on the eye, shall we say. But again, I'd much prefer to see them in thousands. So these data labels down here, I would personally just highlight these, and on this particular chart, I just hit the delete key on the keyboard and they're gone completely, and we've got a slightly cleaner chart on our hands. And back to this one, we can as well, sort of other quick formats, can highlight areas on the chart, and we can do things like make that axis bold, for example. We can highlight this axis, make that bold as well. We could change these number formats. We could make them slightly larger, for example. I would say we're a little bit, probably leave them alone actually. Right, so clicking back on the chart, so what other elements might we be able to add? So what have we done so far? So we might, now we've got the numbers, for example, on the right hand side here, we might decide that we're going to remove that axis completely. So if we do something like that now, because we're showing the numbers on the bars, that can actually look quite clean and tidy compared to how it was a minute ago. So this is looking pretty good now. We've got a title, we've got our data labels, we've got a date. Error bars, they're not relevant in this situation. Now grid lines, we could potentially remove these grid lines now, because we don't actually need any, because we've got the values shown on the columns. But we could, depending on what sort of presentation we want to show, we can have various scale of grid lines. We can have many, very few, lots. So I'm going to actually remove them. Like I say, we've got that. Now we could also add a trend line. Now there's various different types of trend line we can add, but very simply we could say, now in order to add a trend line, we want to select the series first. So if we want to add a sales trend line, which could be quite useful, go to trend line, and we'll just do a linear one for now. And that is giving us, thankfully, an upward trend in sales. And you can see it's appeared on the legend as well. Now we may need, it's unfortunate it doesn't then center the legend, but you can, for example, do something like, drag this legend around. You can even, if you want, edit individual items on the legend. So you can click, say, just the sales, just the profit, just the trend line. You can hit the delete key and it will remove it from the legend, for example, which might look better in this case. And I'm just going to line this up so that it sort of lines up with the title. Because I think, and also we can click on this area and move it up. So that's probably looking like a decent chart already, I feel. So that's a brief overview of chart elements. Now we can change the style, color, layout, etc. of these charts quite simply. We have a predefined selection list here, for example, which we can just have a look at, see what it might look like. Scan through them. This is sometimes a quick way of getting a chart that could look good. There's some pretty radical looking things on here, and that one's potentially okay, but I'm going to leave it as we have it at the moment, but you can see what those would look like. You can also change the color scheme by dropping down on the change colors, and you can see straight away that we can pick some standard sort of color schemes here, various different ones. You've got quite a lot to choose from here. Do you know what? I actually prefer the one I've got. We'll stick that. And then we also have this quick layouts. Now these basically move things around within, and you might find that this is a quick way of producing something you like the look of. You can see the various different things. This is just it might be a shortcut. Might be worth looking at some of these and saying, yeah, actually, I quite like that one. We'll stick with that. But again, I think we've laid it out quite well already, so we're not going to do that. Now, there's one other option on here that I haven't shown you, and this is this move chart. Now, obviously, you can move this chart anywhere around the screen, just literally dragging it. But clicking on Move Chart when the chart is highlighted will allow you to put it in a completely different sheet. So create a sheet of its own, for example, or you can move it to a different sheet within the same workbook. Now, if we do this, move it to a new sheet, I don't find sometimes that it works particularly well. I think you're better off start with the chart where you want it in the first place. So if you're going to want a chart as a sheet on its own, play around with it while it's like that, because when you move it, the font sizes and stuff remain the same, and it sometimes doesn't translate particularly well. Like, for example, the numbers on the columns here, so the data labels on the columns look quite small, and so do the axis labels. They also look quite small now. So you're probably better off just leaving it where it was. So I'm just going to move it back. So we had it as an object in here. Now, unfortunately, it's all it's messed it up again. So, right, I think it was probably something like that, and it now looks okay again. So moving charts around, not ideal in my opinion, unless you're moving it just to another sheet where it's going to be the exact same size and shape, then you're all right. So at the beginning of this video, I showed you how to produce a chart in less than 1 second. Now, what if you wanted to produce the chart that we can now see on the screen in a similar amount of time? Can't promise less than 1 second, but certainly less than 2 or 3. Well, the answer to that is that once you've got something that you like the look of, you can save it as a template. So you do that, you can select the chart and you can right click on it and save as a template. And I'm going to overwrite one of my earlier ones. I'm going to call this chart 2 and save that. Do I want to replace it? Yes, I do. Okay, so I now have this as a template, but how do I apply it? Right, so I've got some new data come in now, maybe a different business or something. So more sales and profit numbers. And again, I'm going to highlight those. I'm going to push Alt F1 to get a quick chart up, which I'm just going to move over there and make a bit larger. And then how do I get this now looking similar to how I did the previous chart? So I'm going to select chart type, and this time you'll see that we go to templates. And chart 2 is the template that I wanted, and you simply just click OK. And there you go. Now, for some strange reason, you still need to type in the titles, which is why I couldn't promise you less than 1 or 2 seconds. But you can give this any title you want, as we did before. Give the axis a title, but predominantly it's looking good from the word go. Now, I did a previous chart as well, so on a template, so I could just show you another one. So this time, a full screen template. This is the one I showed at the beginning. And here we go, there's chart type 1. Here's another potential template. So instant sort of chart looking exactly how you want. If you've got reports that you produce every week or every month, but you're given different data, then this is an excellent way of producing that incredibly quickly indeed. In the next video, I'm going to go through various formatting techniques, a lot more advanced formatting techniques. And I'm going to show you how to go from the basic quick and simple chart that we just produced in under a second, which is shown on screen, and turn it into something that looks more like this, which I hope you agree looks a lot better indeed. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let's hope you find it useful. And if you did, give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.